Hello, and thank you for joining us for CBM Calling on this Monday, April the 27th. So happy. It is Monday. Yes, all the days tend to blur together. At least they have for me, but it is Monday, and we're so glad that you've joined us today. I'm going to be talking with Kallie Hutton and Brenda Halk today. Kallie, of course, is our field staff serving in Cochabamba, Bolivia, alongside her husband, Tim. And Brenda Halk, it works alongside me in the CBM office as strategic programs. What's your title? Strategic, help me, Brenda.
Oh, senior
associate for strategic programs. Yes, and part of that is overseeing our gender initiatives, which we're going to be discussing today. But before that, I do want to give people a reminder that we are going to be hosting a very special event live on Sunday, this coming Sunday, May the 3rd at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. That's going to be our Solidarity Sunday worship service. And we have people from all over the world that are going to be participating in this. And so we really hope that you will be joining us to participate in that as well. So you can watch that here on Facebook, and you can also see that off the CBM website at cbmin.org. Before we start our conversation today, though, with Kallie and Brenda, I just want to give a little bit of a disclaimer because we are talking about some sensitive topics today. So if you happen to be watching this and you have maybe young kids that are in the room and you're not quite ready to be talking about some of these issues with them, I would ask that you maybe come back later and watch this. This is always going to be available to you to watch off our website at a later time or on our Facebook site. So just letting you know that there might be some questions that come out of this if there are young children that are watching alongside with you. So today we're going to be talking about gender initiatives and how this whole COVID-19 crisis has really disproportionately affected women. There was a very interesting report that came out recently that Brenda told me about. And it was from the General Secretary of the UN, or maybe Secretary General of the UN. And he was talking about how this crisis has really impacted women and girls disproportionately. So maybe Brenda, you can just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I think the UN has been working on gender issues, and this year, 2020, marks the 25th anniversary of an initiative that they launched in Beijing to try to have gender equality. Their flag on this article is that they feel the pandemic and the effects on women and children globally is going to just roll this back. It's going to wipe out any of the small gains they've made. As with any pandemic or war or tragedy, it always impacts women greater. It exacerbates an already unequal situation. Unequal in that 60% of the women worldwide are working in informal economies or on the edge of poverty. So it takes much less for them to find themselves in difficult situations. It's having a devastating social and economic consequence for women. And they're encouraging, the purpose of this report is to encourage nations globally to make sure that they focus on women and children during this pandemic.
Kallie, you've seen that. I mean, you've lived that in Bolivia. You see how women already are living in a very precarious situation even before this whole crisis hit. How have you seen that impact the women that you've been working with?
Yeah, I think there's just an increased demand on them on struggles with finances, looking to find work, extra childcare responsibilities. I was speaking with one of my friends who runs one of the larger battered women's shelters, and was asking her kind of what are the issues that women are facing right now. And she said, everyone is being challenged to be this multi-woman. You need to do everything. And for many families here, they're living in one room. And so imagine a room about the size of a bedroom in Canada. And that's where the entire family lives, sleeps, has their kitchen. And so imagine living in that situation. Your kids are not allowed to go outside at all in Bolivia. And you are only allowed to go outside one morning every week. And so trying to manage finances, bringing in money, buying food for your family, taking care of the kids, and being in that kind of confining situation, it's been very difficult for women here.
It's just staggering, some of the statistics we're hearing around domestic abuse in the midst of this. And one of the statistics I heard is that one in 5 women has actually experienced domestic violence this year. That's staggering. That's a global statistic. So that's 1 out of every 5 women. And being in social isolation, I mean, that's a whole other thing. Like for most of us, social isolation is just, it's an inconvenience. But it's a whole other thing when you're living in an abusive relationship. Brenda, I don't know if you have more to share on that. I know you've been in touch with friends who are social workers and are working alongside women who are in these situations.
Now, I've touched base with some of the local social workers at Family and Children's Services and in the crisis shelters. There's a lot written about this locally, so no matter where you are, you can find this in your region. But they're worried. They're worried that women and children who are already at risk, the risk is going to increase. They've seen an increase in domestic violence. And one article that I read saw a decrease in issues with children. And they're really worried about that. They said they know that hasn't gone down. But for many children, their safest part of their day was going to school or to daycare. And I read in one article that 40% of the reports that help children to deal with this come from the school background. So they're worried about being able to help children, about dealing with the challenges. They are putting a lot of articles out because they want people to know that the agencies are still open. There is still counseling available online or by phone. But there has been a decrease in actual programming where they can actually be face-to-face with the women and the children. The stresses of this pandemic, the increased stresses of finances, of being locked down with an abuser, are increasing their risk. And they know that that's happening. It's spiked all over the world. And they've also losing some of their safe places to go. They don't go out to work during the day. They can't go to a community center or to a library or even to a coffee shop to get away. And some of those, for women who are immigrants or for whom English is not their first language, they've lost their resources. As Canadians in Canada, we talk about being able to do everything online. These are people who don't have the language skills, don't have the computer, and are used to accessing even the internet in places that are now closed. So for children, they're really worried. They said the agencies are still open, the shelters are still open, they're opening more, but they really need people to keep their eyes and ears open. And if you see something of concern, to make sure that you also call someone who can help.
Well, and Kallie, you have certainly been involved with women who have been in these kinds of situations of domestic abuse, just even irregular times. I'm just wondering what changes you've seen since this whole social isolation has began.
Mm-hmm. I think escaping has become very difficult for women here. So if you're in a violent situation and you're trying to get away, there's no public transportation in Bolivia right now or private transportation. So if you're living in a more isolated area, there's not those same ways of getting out. There's less people around and on the streets who you can run to for help. And I think because people are dealing with extra stresses right now, with financial stresses, with fear of what's going to happen in the future, if you're already living with an abusive person, there are more triggers. And so there's more risk of violent outbursts against women and against children. So that you're at a higher risk for that as well. And one of the women that I work with was telling me that her husband has now spent all of their savings on alcohol, and she's too afraid to bring it up with him because she knows that will trigger him. And so she's now depending on the generosity of neighbors to feed herself and her 5 children. But there are lots of women who are living in this fear and don't know how to escape from it.
Well, and that that helps to answer one of the questions that someone once asked me. A very well-meaning person that I knew well, who supports CBM's work, said, well, why are so much of CBM's programs geared toward women? And he didn't mean it as an insult, or, you know, he just wanted to know why, and it was an innocent question. But you know, even year round, for many years, it's always been a focus of CBM's work around gender programming, right? Gender-based programming. So, you know, maybe we can just talk more about why that is so important, and what kind of work we are doing all the time, not just during this COVID-19 crisis, but all the time, why we are working with women and alongside women. So maybe Kallie, you can talk more about what we're doing in Bolivia.
Sure. One of our gender-based projects here in Bolivia is Eagle's Wings, or we call it here ADA. And it works with women whose husbands are in prison. And we're teaching them about parenting, about women's and children's rights, as those are things that they're dealing with and need information about all the time. We are doing devotions with them. And then we're also teaching them how to sew and how to market their creations. And so this has been a really, one of the bright spots in my life is working with these women and getting to know them. And it's become very difficult for them during the COVID quarantines, because many of them continue to need to support their husbands. So their husbands are in prison, and the prison system here is rather different. You need to earn your keep. So many of the men will do carpentry or welding, but obviously none of that is happening during the quarantine. And so they have no way to earn income to buy food for themselves. So these women are having to come in to bring money or food to their husbands, bribe the guards to get it to them, at the same time as trying to care for their own kids, feed their own kids. You're only allowed out one morning a week, and you've had your main source of income cut off. So the situation that they're in is just almost impossible. And one of the things that I feel really blessed by is that we were able to receive an order from the Atlantic Baptist Women, actually. And we were able to purchase all of the material for that, cut it all, and send each of the moms home with all of their material and a sewing machine. So they've been able to earn income through that order while they've been in quarantine. So that's been a huge blessing and support for them. And these moms they've got their little social network groups where they're messaging one another and making sure each other are okay. And, you know, I haven't heard from you in a while. How can I pray for you? I just spoke to one of them last night, and her oldest daughter, before all of this happened, went to Chile to work with her uncle. And she just got news that her uncle has tested positive for COVID, and her daughter is now stuck in Chile with no way of getting home, and she's very worried. So to be able to have that support network of other women who understand what you're going through, who can pray for you when there's really not a whole lot else that can be done, has just been a real blessing to these women.
So it's definitely, we're seeing how the value of having that support base all year round has made such a difference. When this crisis hit, you're able to do that for these women and have work for them to be able to continue doing, because you already had that support in place from the Atlantic Baptist Women, which is incredible. Brenda, I'm wondering if in some other fields, what we're seeing, I mean, this is happening. I mean, women are impacted all over the world and all the countries that we're working in. I'm wondering if you can share some of the other things that you've been seeing.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jennifer. I've been asked that same question. Why are we focusing on women? And it's more that we're focusing on gender, that this is the gender that is on the edge, much closer to the edge, and always the most heavily impacted. It's not as much as it is, I've always said it's not as much as it is women's rights as it is human rights, to have equal access, equal education, equal work. And it always impacts heavily on women. In many of the fields that we work, besides the fact that the woman may be the farmer or the day worker in the family, she also now is caring for her children, maybe caring for elderly parents. And again, we think we can go out once a week for groceries. A day worker or a farmer, they don't have the money to buy more than today's meal. The classic routine is that they go to work, they're paid on that day for what they've done, and they buy their food for that evening. So now they're out of work, and even the limitations of being able to move around to find work are just incredibly much more exacerbating in their situation. And they have all of these other issues also put onto their plate.
Yeah, I like what you said, Brenda, because when you and I have talked about this gender issue so many times, and I always say it's not a women's issue. This is not gender equity is not a women's issue. It's a justice issue. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm grateful that CBM has always held that stance, and why gender initiatives is so important to CBM. So I want to conclude our conversation by offering some helpful things that we could be doing, because I think it's easy for us to feel very helpless in all this. And I want us to leave on a note of saying, you know what, there are supports out there. There are things that we can be doing to help support some of the initiatives and to help women that are struggling with this. Brenda, maybe you can just talk a little bit about what's happening locally that people can access, and then maybe Kallie, you can talk about in your area what's happening as well.
Sure. Locally, I know all of the organizations in the area of Ontario that I'm in are listing resources on their websites. They're very easy to find. And usually if you find one organization, whether you go to a local counseling organization or your regional political organization or Family and Children's Services, there's a network that will lead you to all kinds of things, programming, activities, counseling. But I do want to say right off the top that for anyone who feels that they are at immediate risk, they need to call 911. They should not, don't go through the programming if you feel that you are at immediate risk or danger. Please make that call. If you're not at immediate risk, the police departments also have non-emergency lines, and they are stepping up to the plate and providing pathways through the internet or over the phone that will get you to the people in the programmings and the counseling that can help. And also from a local thing, keep your eye on your neighbor. Even though we have to be socially distanced, stay connected to your neighbor, your friends, your family. Usually, often one of the first signs of someone struggling with this is their isolation. So if someone hasn't reached out to you for a while, reach out to them. Make sure they're okay.
Good advice.
Absolutely. I agree with Brenda. Keep in contact with your neighbors. If you have women in your life who you're concerned about, reach out to them. Make sure that they know that you're a person that can be trusted, that you're there to help. And I think also be aware of the local resources that you have around you. Find out where the local shelters are, contact them, see if there's anything you can do to help or any way that you can be supporting them. And especially for pastors and church leaders, be aware of what's available in your community. And if you're not sure what you would do if somebody came to you asking for help with domestic abuse, there's no time like the present to become prepared, to reach out to the shelters, to the local resources, see how you can partner with them so that if and when something comes up, you feel prepared to respond in a way that is going to actually help these women who are suffering.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you both so much. I know this is a topic that's very deep for both of you, and you feel passionate about it as I do. So I'm really grateful that we've had this time to have this conversation today. I just want to give a little shout out to some of the people that are watching. So Catherine Carson, I'm just butchering people's names as I do this, but is out of good intentions. Catherine Carsons Schmidt, I think is her name, Carsons. It's an unusual name. She says hi. And Brenda Mann, of course, we know Brenda. She says, thank you for your thoughtfulness. Estella Ng, who frequently does tune in for our broadcasts. Hello there. And Sherry Mebs says, Kallie, you are so wonderful. Just you, Kallie, not me and Brenda, just you. You are so wonderful. And Elaine McGill also says hi to Kallie. And Randy, our colleague Randy Stanton, says this is an awesome quote from Brenda around the human rights. And Estella Ng actually had a question. She would like to know how she would be able to support some of the people. So maybe, and the sewing project. So maybe we will get in touch with Estella afterward and talk about how she can support the Eagles Wings project. And we have Michelle. I'm not even going to try to mention the last name, but she's watching from Goma in the DRC. So wonderful that we have someone tuning in from the Congo today. So I want to just conclude with us talking a little bit about She Matters. And we've talked about why it is so important to support gender-based initiatives all the time. And we've done that partially through the She Matters campaign that I know a lot of people have been involved in and have supported over the past few years. And so we just want people, if you want to find out more information about that, please go to cbmin.org/She Matters, and you can find out more about what we are doing all the time through our gender-based programming through She Matters and how you can support. And actually today we want to ask people the question as to why women and girls in your life matter to you. So those of you who've already participated in She Matters before, you may have already done that sign before and said, she matters to me because I know that I did it. I know Brenda did it. I'm sure Kallie did it as well. And we're asking people today just why women and girls in your own life matter to you. And we also want to point people to Tim and Kallie's page. If you want to get in touch with Kallie directly, you are able to do that through their page. There's a little contact information button there that you're able to email Kallie. And there is the same also for Brenda. Brenda also has a page on our website, and you're able to contact Brenda that way. And lastly, before we sign off, we just want to remind people again, Solidarity Sunday. We have a live broadcast going on this coming Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to have voices from all over the world who are going to be participating in that. So we do hope that you will join us and you will tune in for that. So come back tomorrow for CBM Calling with Joe Breedy from Lebanon. He'll be speaking with Adrian, so that should be a good one. Well, thank you so much, Kallie and Brenda. It's been wonderful having a great conversation with you today. And we'll say goodbye for now, and we'll be in touch. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.